begin. Hello, thank you for watching this webinar today, developed to help you navigate the Creative Venue Grant Program. I'm Melissa Cerrone, and I'm the Grants and Programs Manager for the Office of Arts and Culture at the City of Sacramento. And today I'm going to walk you through round 2 of the Creative Venue Recovery Grants. I'm going to introduce you to the program, talk about how it came about and how it differs from our first round of grants, which were just awarded about a week ago. Here's the agenda for the webinar. First, I'm going to give you a little background on how the program came about. And this is important mainly so you can see why we've designed it the way we have and why it may have a few more requirements than other grants that the city offers. We'll talk about changes from round 1 of funding. Then I'm going to spend most of our time on eligibility because there has been some confusion about what qualifies as a venue for the purpose of this grant. We don't want anyone to waste their time applying for a grant that they don't qualify for or forget to include information that will speak to your qualifications. And we'll talk a little bit about the 3 types of venues eligible for funding. Then we'll go over how the funds can be spent. We'll introduce you to our grant platform and show you how to access the application and go through the questions. I'll go over the process of reviewing applications, how we do it, and what the city is looking for. But the first thing I want to stress before I say anything else is to please read the complete guidelines, which you can find on our website. Before you even open the application, go to our website, and we can put that in the chat, I believe, and read the entire document. Many applicants are not funded for 2 reasons. Number 1, they didn't review the eligibility requirements carefully enough. And number 2, they never read the full guidelines. They went straight to the application and started filling it in without ever reviewing the document that tells them what we are looking for in an application. So I'd like to give you a little background on this grant. When the city received American Rescue Plan Act funds in 2022 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Office of Arts and Culture was given $10 million at the recommendation of the mayor to support relief and recovery for the creative sector. In addition to supporting individual artists and nonprofit cultural organizations, the framework included funds to support creative businesses. And one of these ways was to support independent venues. We know because we've heard from many of you that venues have taken an extremely hard hit from the pandemic and that recovery has been slow but steady. We also know that creative venues are part of the lifeblood of our creative economy, and they drive business to the city, employ thousands, and add vibrancy to our neighborhoods, and they support the work of local artists. So while we've already supported nonprofit performance in gallery spaces, we wanted a program that was specific to the spaces we don't usually fund, our for-profit spaces. So first note, if you're representing a nonprofit organization today, this is not the grant for you. Also, the reason that I bring up the fact that it's an ARPA-funded grant program is to let you know that reporting requirements will have an additional layer that is related to federal government compliance. If funded, we'll be asking you to provide periodic budget reports, to complete a risk assessment form, and to keep these funds separate from others, and also to keep all records for at least 5 years. And in many cases, we'll ask you to provide us with copies of signed agreements with contractors or vendors and your receipts. And you'll also be asked to complete funding reports, both at midterm and in requests for final funding. So there's a little bit more involved with this grant. So I want you to know upfront that it's going to have a little bit more stringent reporting requirements. So what are the funding changes we made to round 2 grants? We awarded 15 grants about a week ago to the first round of recovery grants. And then in that round of recovery grants, we actually put out 2 different types of grants that you could apply for. But in the second round, it's going to be much simpler. There's only 1 application and only 1 grant, which is venue recovery. In this round, very important, there are no geographic limitations. So you can be located anywhere as long as your venue is in a qualified City of Sacramento district represented by a city council office. So anywhere in the city is eligible. You must be able to prove that you've been in operation for at least 8 months prior to the date of this application. So you'll need to show your active status from at least mid-January of 2024. And because the pool of funds is somewhat smaller in this round, we've capped the performance venue grants at $20,000. Galleries and bookstores can still request grants of $10,000. And remember, we won't change the size of your grant. If you apply for $20,000 and you're awarded, that's the amount that you will be getting. And we will be instructing our panel to pay really close attention to the amount of live activity presented at a venue. So funds are very limited in the second round and are going to be very competitive. And we want to be sure that live performance is actually the driver of a business or venue. And again, this is for the performance venues. But we'll be going through each different type of venue, but again, support for artists. And again, if you're a performance venue, that is live performance. So eligibility, I want to be really clear in this section because I'm guessing this is where many of the questions are going to arise. What qualifies as a venue? So if I'm a restaurant or a bar, but I program music maybe twice a month and I don't charge a cover, am I a venue? If I'm a retail store that sells one-of-a-kind jewelry, am I a gallery? If I'm a yoga studio that sells books about wellness and brings occasional speakers in, do I qualify as a bookstore? For the purpose of this grant, and I'm only really speaking for this grant only, in all of these situations, the answer would be no, you would not qualify. This doesn't take anything away from your purpose or the value of businesses like yours, but with very limited funds for a lot of venues in the community, we needed to define very carefully what qualifies. This was an issue with some round one applicants that didn't meet our eligibility requirements. So we want to be really clear before you apply how we determine your eligibility. So there are 3 things that we're going to ask you for in the application. First, that your mission or primary purpose and revenue is through live performance, book sales, or art gallery sales. We want to see that your website and social media sites are consistent with your purpose, and that you've attached documentation of business activities that are directly related to your purpose. So I'm going to go through the different types of venues, and the first is the live performance venue. And the guidelines are very specific, probably more specific here than with any other type of venue. So I'm going to go through the qualifications on each type. So live music, comedy, and performance venues must be for profit. And that means your tax status would be as a corporation, limited liability company, partnership, or sole proprietorship. You need to regularly program original live music, comedy, or similar performing arts as a primary driver of your business, meaning that's where most of your clientele and income comes from. This does not mean that you have an occasional cover band. We're trying to support local artists who are making a living doing original work. You need to show that you provide fair pay to artists. They don't pay for tips or they don't play for free. We'll check your financial records carefully to see evidence of payments to artists and that it's a significant part of your overall budget. You'll be asked to show that you pay one or more of the following: sound engineers, bookers, promoters, stage managers, security personnel, or box office personnel. Again, we ask that you have a paid ticket or cover charge to attend most performances. You advertise, have printed schedules, or use electronic publications. You have a website, do e-blasts, or promote on social media. Again, we'd ask that you've been in business for at least 6 months prior to this application, and that you are currently open and plan to be so for at least the next year. We've had people come to us that were closed down at the time of the application, but were intending to reopen, and that would not be eligible. You need to be currently open. Obviously, that you're in the city of Sacramento, so this is not Sacramento County, it's city only. And very importantly, you program local artists as part of your offering, because again, we want to support the local art scene. Next, for art galleries or craft galleries, we ask that you're a fine art or craft gallery or visual arts space that is a for-profit business. Again, corporation, limited liability, partnership, or sole proprietorship. Your primary purpose or mission is to support local artists and craftspeople through promotion, exhibition, and sale of work. So if you're a pottery studio whose main goal is really to teach workshops and classes, or to offer workspaces, to local artists, this really wouldn't qualify you for this grant. And if your business is to promote your own work or the work of your partner, you also would not qualify. We ask that you program on-site public events such as gallery openings, workshops, artist talks, and other events that are related to your mission and open to the public. We ask that you promote these events through advertising, listings, in print or electronic sites. You've been in business for at least 8 months and are currently open and plan to be so for the next year. And again, that you're in the city. And finally, for bookstores, the last category of eligibility, same categories for for for-profit tax eligibility. There needs to be evidence that you support local artists, writers, and independent presses through on-site readings, convenings, book club meetings, events, or performances. We ask that you promote these events through advertising, listings, website, e-blasts, etc. So an example of a bookstore that might not meet the qualifications would be one where they sold used or new books, but they didn't promote or explicitly sell works by local artists, and they did not regularly schedule events, readings, or performances. So it's going to be up to each applicant to demonstrate how they meet the requirements and show evidence that they've done so consistently. This is a competitive grant with no more than about 13 organizations receiving funding. So the panel is going to look closely at all of these requirements. Whenever we go over the eligibility of businesses or organizations, I always want to be sure that I cover what would make you not eligible. And sometimes this is the quickest way to make sure folks aren't wasting their time on this grant. So again, this would include businesses that focus on the work of 1 or 2 artists, usually your own work. Businesses that are publicly traded, national or multinational. Again, we're looking for local businesses. Venues that are owned or managed in more than one state. Also businesses that operate for the purposes of sporting events, karaoke, exotic dancing, fitness, or private events, such as galas and weddings. Private homes, schools, chain movie theaters. Again, all of these will be ineligible. We've tried to give you examples of everything we could think of, but there will always be examples of businesses that do more than one thing. And again, we're going to look at where is the activity weighted more. So if you have a question, I really encourage you to check in with us before you go through the application, because we're going to be looking at these things really carefully. So again, also venues that operate as public or private event spaces. There are a lot of event spaces that do some aspects of these other things, but their goal is to be rented out as an event space. Pop-up or temporary spaces aren't eligible, or are retail stores or cafes. So those are all of the categories that I can think of right now. So how can the funds be spent? Now you've reviewed the guidelines, you've confirmed that your business qualifies under one of the 3 categories, you know how much you can get, and you've confirmed that you meet all your eligibility requirements. So you're ready to apply. How can you spend the money? This is the important thing. Again, remember, these are city funds for relief and recovery. So the categories where you can spend the money are going to be limited to what helps you recover from the effects of the pandemic, including rising costs, which is most beneficial for the local artists you serve. The good news is that the funds can be spent in some very basic areas where you can use them the most. So we will consider venue rent costs. Those tend to be high and a really easy place to spend your funds. Insurance premiums like workman's comp, workers' health, liability, etc. We know that insurance costs are going up and have doubled for a lot of venues. So this is also another really great place that you could spend your money. Marketing and communications, website development, maintenance or website upgrades, ticketing systems, event permitting and security fees for public events, and support for live public events or series, including obviously payment to artists. And we're going to get very specific when we ask you to submit a budget. We'll need to see that you're going to spend it in one of the categories that we've just listed. So it's not enough to say that you're going to spend it on contractors. We're going to ask you what kind of contractors. Are they booking people? Are they marketing people? Are they artist fees or something like that? And also we're going to ask how they help you accomplish your event or performances. If you want to pay artists, we're going to ask you how much you're paying each. And then we're going to actually ask you to show us documentation that you did use the funds to pay artists. So we always recommend you use the fund to pay the one or two things that you absolutely know you're going to need. If you can, use the grant for rent or predictable artist costs or insurance, known, not necessarily anticipated, but known expenses, because things can always come up. So if you tell us you're going to spend $25,000 on a new ticketing system, we're going to ask you to send us the estimates on the expense, and then we're going to ask you to send us a receipt showing that you actually purchased it. So if after you've submitted your budget for your contract, if you've been funded, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, we don't really need the new ticketing system, or it's too expensive, the rates have gone up, then you're going to have to backtrack, and we've asked you to spend it in the categories that you put on your contract. So it's much more complicated. And again, we want you to be able to spend it in areas that you can spend it relatively quickly. So if you foresee costs that are coming down the line and may not be as immediate, we'd ask you maybe take a look at where some of your more immediate costs are. And again, we always love our organizations and businesses that pay artists. So if you know you have an ongoing cost that goes into paying artists, that's a terrific way to spend your funds too. Okay, so the application really shouldn't be too hard to complete. It shouldn't take too much time, as long as you have all the necessary attachments ready to upload, which is why I recommend reading the guidelines first to be sure you're ready to apply. So when you get into the application, first you're going to be completing a questionnaire that's going to ask basic information about your business and ask for contact information. And when you've completed the questionnaire, if it deems that you're eligible, it'll allow you to move on to the full application. We're going to ask you some questions about your business and who you serve. We're going to ask you a budget for the grant and how you plan to use the funds if you are approved. We've asked you to also upload additional materials such as your 2023 schedule of performances or events. And again, we're asking you to look into the past. So if you can't go all the way back through the entire 2023, as much as you can of past performances. And then we're going to ask you for your projected schedule of performances, events, activities that are happening at your venue space. So we're going to ask you to project forward to see the amount of activity that you have. Documentation of your business activities, so a financial statement or annual report that shows your annual receipts and costs for the most recently completed fiscal year. So whatever your fiscal year is, we want to see the one that has been most recently completed. We will ask for the balance sheet for the month end prior to this date. So it would be, a balance sheet from September 2024. And if you don't have that, then you could go back to August, but really the most recent month that you've completed, just so that we can see your monthly costs. We will ask for a signed W-9 with business address and your EIN dated with signature, and a certificate of good standing with the Secretary of State or a screenshot of that. If you've never applied for a grant before, or at least one with the city, you're probably wondering how we select who gets the funds. Excuse me. So if there are 30 eligible applicants for the recovery grant and only 13 grants for us to distribute, there needs to be a system to determine who's going to get these grants. So at the Office of Arts and Culture, we have a process that we use for our competitive grants, and that includes a panel review and a scoring rubric. So recommendations for funding are made to the staff by a panel comprised of independent individuals from the field. So in this case, we'll invite someone with experience in the types of venues supported. So someone with music, literature, poetry experience, or visual arts or crafts. We could also have someone who has experience with managing or owning a venue, and usually one or more city employee with experience in economic or community development or facility management. They review the applications, score them, and the top scored applications are recommended for funding. So again, if we have only a certain number of grants to give out in a particular category, so if there are only 5 grants that can be given out to music or performance venues, it would be the top 5 that scored in that category that would be funded. So then the important thing for you to remember, though, is that you're not going to be funded because you have the most successful venue in the city, or one of the panelists knows who you are and loves going to your venue and thinks it's the best thing in the world. You're going to get recommended based on how you answer the questions in the application, and also the quality of the attachments you submit and how closely you follow the rubric that we set out for you. So we ask that when you review the guidelines, please look at the rubric very carefully, because it's going to tell you exactly what's most important to us in your application. In this grant, we're reviewing you on 3 things: community impact, artistic impact, and demonstrated need. We want to see what you're doing in and for your community. Are you having a positive economic impact on the neighborhood? Is your community coming to your programs and events? Do you create programs that are valuable to that community? Do you engage or partner with other businesses, schools, community groups? And do you support local artists and new artistic voices? And if so, how? We also want to know about the art you present. Are you a place that people want to experience when they come and visit the city? Are you supporting really great artists? What are you paying artists and why? We are going to ask what your range of pay is, and we really do expect to get an answer in that area so that we can see how you're valuing the artist, and you can give us a reason for your rate of pay. We also want to know, are you supporting new original work, or are you preserving a cultural art form or tradition? And finally, we're going to ask why you need these funds. What's going to be better with the funding, and why is that critical to you now? We'll ask you to tell us about your loss during the pandemic and how you are working to recover, or what's going on in your organization. Have costs increased? Are you trying to move in a new direction? So what are some of the areas that you really feel you need this funding for? Please know that we don't expect everyone to address every single one of these categories perfectly, but if you're strong enough in many of the areas, you're going to increase your chances of being funded. And finally, we're going to get into the timeline. So it's a pretty quick turnaround for the second round of grants. Again, it's not a difficult grant application, so we do believe that there should be plenty of time. Today is the information webinar that we are taping, and we're going to be putting it up on our website very soon. The applications will be open. We have it as October 4th. It might be a day or 2 later than that, but no worries, you'll get information about that and have plenty of time to apply. We're going to keep the application open for most of the month, so till the 28th of October. We're going to ask if you have any questions. Please feel free to write in, and I'll give you an email address very shortly. But then we're going to publish all the answers to the questions, because we get a lot of great questions that come from the field, and we think it's really valuable for everybody to have equal access to these questions. The deadline is October 28th, and that is a deadline of 11:59 p.m. Please don't try to apply at midnight, because that gets into the next day, and if you go anywhere beyond 11:59, you will not be able to get into that application or to submit it. We usually ask people to try to submit earlier than that. If you wait right up until the deadline, something could go wrong, and we only really are able to support anybody with questions on their application up to 4 p.m. on the day of the application. The review period takes about a month. And then we move into the award notification. It usually has to go through a few processes to get to the awards. and then we go to contract, and the grant term is no longer than 12 months. I don't think these grants need to last the entire 12 months, but if you need to use the funds over a 12-month period, that's perfectly fine. So finally, if you have any questions, I really welcome questions. And again, particularly about eligibility or any questions about the application. We have a email account, which is very specific to grants, and it's artgrants@thecityofsacramento.org. So if you see something, or if you're a little bit confused about the application, please write to us. We usually get back to you within 24 hours, unless it's on a weekend, but we'll try to get back to you very quickly with an answer. And again, we also will publish all answers if they are received by our question deadline. So timelines are subject to change. They can change slightly, but we'll never ask you to have something done earlier than what we've published. If it changes at all, it might be pushed back a little bit, but we would give you plenty of notice about that. And we'll let you know either via our website or the submittable platform if you've already started an application. So that's all we have today. I really want to thank you all for listening. And again, please reach out with any questions you have about the application or our process. And if you don't understand a question or something in the rubric, again, please call us or email us, and we'll try to help you figure it out. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.